So is this what we're referring to, Will, when we're talking about histamine intolerance, this allergic reaction to certain substances?
No. So we're building up towards histamine intolerance, and we're starting with sort of the classic histamine reaction, which are these allergic reactions to things. But there's an important distinction to make. So, allergies help us to understand the excess histamine, but allergies and histamine intolerance are actually two different things. And to understand histamine intolerance, we have to take a look at the other way that histamine can enter our body. And that's actually through the food that we eat.
Well, I think talking about the food that we eat is sort of the reason for this podcast. So where do we start?
Okay, so I want to take you on a little journey, Jonathan. I love to take these little journeys with you. And we're going to start with something called histidine. Histidine, so it's a little bit different.
Okay, so histidine, not histamine?
That's right. So histidine is one of the 20 amino acids that are the building blocks of protein. Now, when histidine comes into contact with an enzyme, again, I apologize for being such a nerd, but L-histidine decarboxylase, for my nerds out there, it converts histidine into histamine. And many species of bacteria have this exact enzyme. And this conversion process is a normal part of the life cycle of our food. So what that means is as foods ripen and ferment and eventually decay, histamine is being produced.
Okay, so then I eat this ripe or fermented food and the histamine ends up in my stomach?
That's right. But our journey doesn't end there, because histamine then will move from your stomach into your small intestine, where it comes into contact with an enzyme called a DAO, or diamine oxidase. Now, DAO is our defense system within the intestine to neutralize histamine in our diet before the histamine is able to get into the bloodstream by crossing the epithelium. Now, the epithelium is a single layer of cells that lines the intestine. So, with this single layer of cells, if what's inside the intestine, like the histamine, can cross to the other side, it can enter the bloodstream, and then it can spread throughout the body in a matter of seconds.
So I'm now imagining this DAO a bit like the security check at the airport. It's operating the X-ray machine. It's going to remove sharp objects or, liquids or any of the things that your small child thought would be funny to put in your bag at the last minute, like a big pair of scissors. And it's going to, in fact, in this case, check for histamine and rip it out of there before allowing the bags, safe through to the other side.
Yeah, that's right. And I think one of the important things is that your body already is producing histamine, right? So the outside histamine, this is not something that we need from a dietary perspective, and it can spoil the balance.
Got it. So I said, I don't want that because I'm managing the right amounts in the right place, and this is all going to mess with it. So when everything is operating, normally that's happening. What can go wrong?
Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is something that's called histamine intoxication. And this is a form of food poisoning that occurs after the consumption of foods with an unusually high histamine content. And the histamine overpowers the degradation mechanisms in the small intestine. And basically, you are flooding the bloodstream with an excessive, massive amount of histamine.
So the team did a bit of research on this because histamine intoxication sounds quite exciting. After all, alcohol intoxication is something that many of us have tried from time to time. Apparently, it wasn't always called this, Will. It had the rather less appealing name of scombroid fish poisoning.
Yeah.
And this is because, I am told, it is closely related to the consumption of spoiled fish in the Scombridae family, which includes tuna and mackerel. However, over the years, the World Health Organization has instead recommended the use of the term histamine intoxication. I assume partly because it can be brought on by eating other types of fish and so to cheese, and also because I think nobody other than like 7 biologists know what the scombridii family is. So I guess they've gone for slightly clearer terminology.
Yeah, no one knows what that is, but we all know that a bad piece of tuna is not a good thing. And so you want to avoid the bad tuna if you can.
I love it when the World Health Organization tells you not to eat like fish that's gone rotten. That's really helpful.
Let's start with the fundamentals of a healthy diet here. So
that's right.
That's right. So 98% of these histamine intoxication cases are caused by bad fish. And the remaining 2% is attributed to cheese. Now, this is not like the routine cheese that you get at your store, so there's no reason to be fearful of your cheese. But these are sort of rare cases where these things have unusually high histamine levels due to their interaction with certain bacteria. And it's interesting to note that unlike other types of food poisoning, histamine intoxication outbreaks have increased over the last 10 years. And it's considered actually one of the main problems of global food security. That's a surprise, right?
That's amazing. So what does histamine intoxication feel like if you have it?
It's not fun. So I want our listeners to picture this. Around 20 to 30 minutes after eating some funky tuna, you develop a throbbing headache. You start to feel nauseated. And then a wave of explosive diarrhea comes hard. Your face is flushed. You're having palpitations, like your heart is beating out of your chest. And you are sweating profusely. Okay. What I just described lasts for about half a day. It's not fun.
It sounds terrible.
Yes. And once again, what we come back to is don't eat the funky tuna. But in all seriousness, histamine intoxication is intense, as you can tell. But the good news is it's a one-time event. So this is a little bit different, though, than histamine intolerance, because histamine intolerance is not just a one-time event. This is a chronic condition, so it will occur more frequently and even can be caused by seemingly normal food at times.
And it's funny. It just reminds me of like the thing that my mum always said, which is like, don't mess around with the fish. If you think it might have gone off, don't eat it. And I guess this is this is sort of the story of why you make sure that if you are eating fish, like it's fresh, because nobody needs that sort of intoxication.
That's right.
So you're now moving us on to intolerance and histamine intolerance. What does that mean?
Yeah. So this word intolerance, we've heard it on this podcast when we talk about food intolerances. And food intolerance is not an allergy, but instead it's some sort of hypersensitivity to a specific component of our food. So in this case, the hypersensitivity is to histamine.